Welcome to this election 2016 edition of Newsmakers, New Mexico House District 53 with Democrat Willie Madrid. A program note, Republican Ricky Little was invited to join us, and we hope to have him on a future program. The questions that we're going to be talking about tonight were submitted by the public for this program, and we do want to welcome Willie Madrid to Newsmakers. Willie, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Fred, for having us.
It's great to have you here.
Yes.
So to start off with, we're going to get into some pretty controversial issues. As I mentioned, the public did submit these questions. We took a lot of questions by email and got some great questions that have been in the news lately, and some of which may be taken up by the New Mexico legislature. We begin with, do you support physician assistance in dying? Yes or no, and why?
I think that's a real hardline question that's coming to bear a lot on people's, on all families, really. So I think in the end, I'd have to tell you that it's an issue that we need to look in closely. We need to, I think, set up some some pre-form, pre-screenings, as well as maybe post or something to the effect that suits our people entirely. And I still think that's something that needs to be left to the public to vote on, and we may have to make that decision in the end. But in the end, I still think I'd like to have more input from our public. That's kind of my biggest part of my campaign is that the public needs to know, the constituents need to know that their vote is what helps us make those decisions. Their wishes, their expectations in these areas need to be brought back to our people, our constituents. And I think that's the defense I'd like to take most of all in my campaign. Is I've been approaching and talking to people from all of my areas of district, and they want faith. They want rebuilding of faith of our public, serving. And that's what my role would be, is serving the public. So
it sounds like on this particular issue, you have not really decided on it yet. You want to get more public input before deciding whether or not there can legally be physician assistance in dying.
I think so. I think it's a question that's high on people's list, but I think in myself as being a candidate and working for the people, I have the right as well to do my investigation and gain more insight before I want to say exactly on this issue.
Okay. So for our next question, it actually is specifically about whether or not the people get to decide an issue directly. So this isn't about your position. You're welcome to share it, but the question that was submitted to us is actually getting right to the issue that you brought up.
Okay.
Do you support allowing voters to decide on the legal sale of recreational marijuana in New Mexico? Yes or no, and why?
Well, I think it needs to be the public's view and more. We only have one state right now that has it in a recreational way, and yet that's still data being compiled that we need to study from. I think it's a issue here.
You're referring to Colorado?
Yes, sir, to Colorado.
The one state closest
to us,
we should say,
exactly.
Because there are several states. But you believe that then that the public should get a chance to vote on this in New Mexico?
Yes, because there's a lot of good things that have come from it in the way of helping kids, and I work in education, so I know firsthand, and seeing the seizures that can occur. If there's some way to diminish it or to demise it a little bit, I'm all for that. I think of parents in past talking to parents, and I have a neighbor that's real close, and they've had to do that. And you know what? If it gives a little bit of quality of life to our young people, to our old people, I think that's something that we need to bear together as a forum country and vote on these things, and particularly within our state.
What do you say to critics who say that we already have medical marijuana in our state that does deal with medical issues? This question is about recreational marijuana, and critics who may say that this could present danger, particularly folks who use marijuana and may drive, for instance.
Yeah, I think that's a severe issue that is being contended in all levels in all of our states right now, and it's not legal. And so I would still support the law as it stands in saying that it shouldn't be legalized yet in a recreational way until we have more information to support.
Well, that's your personal opinion, but you also said, just to be clear, that you believe that the voters should be able to vote on this to decide. Is that right?
You know, it allows itself to be interpreted a couple of ways. And if I'm sitting on the fence, it's because that's where I'm sitting on the fence. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be legalized, and I'm not saying it should be legalized. I see both ends of the spectrum on this, having firsthand experience it with young people. So yes, I think as a parent, I have those same issues. I think as being a candidate and a possible House representative, I weigh on the conscience of what my constituents are asking of me.
Okay.
So,
another issue that we want to get into tonight, and this is an issue that, as you know, has been in the news for some time, and that's New Mexico's economy. The state provides a wide variety of incentives for businesses to relocate here. This question asks, how would you provide, as a legislator, incentives for businesses to relocate to our state, if any?
You know, right now with our deficit being as it is, I think we need to get back to understanding what is our resource and better diversify in choosing what we want to bring into our state and making sure that it's always in a way of renewable energies, things that we're not putting all into one basket like we have in our oil situation right now. And that's, I think, what's caused a great deal of our deficit. So, I mean, I see that as more of a issue that we need to be diversified and be careful with what we're diversifying with. But I want to say we welcome it more than ever. I think our state offers some of the best time weather year-round to offer more companies to come to our state. So in way of discounts or tax breaks, yeah, I think it's possible we could come to some medium. But until we have a better commission understanding what is it that we want to move towards as a state that's viable, that's sustainable, and provides our people that work hard to get ahead.
Next question is related, but not specifically about incentives. What should the state legislature do to improve the economy in New Mexico? So a much more general question for you about other ways that the state's economy can be improved.
Well, I think in our state, we have probably the best sunniest days, more than any other state. And I think that's something that allows us to move into renewable energies. But I also believe that that's going to be with the help of the university. I think we need to get more university involvement in these issues that can help us diversify within our states. Their technologies to the top and their abilities to present and provide research data is exactly what we need to be. I'm not going to be a pencil pusher. I'm not going to be somebody that just signs these bills through and make them laws just to keep one end of the state happy versus the other end of the state that has a lot of needs. And that being said, that's where it comes. I keep coming back to these simpler ways of what I have to address within my district, and that's, you know, a need for gas, natural gas that can't be attained to certain parts of our district, Precinct 5, Precinct 6. I've got Otero County and Chaparral that still doesn't have those things, and yet the North does. I mean, when we start splitting hairs, it gets really fine and really a little unclear. And I want to make it clear to our constituents that we are working for, that we are voted into office for, that we need to be listening to what they're asking for. So many times I think we leave our public out of not letting them be a part of the involvement. That's my concept of a stronger community, building a stronger community, is that every town that I've been to has the strong people of common. And the comment I'm talking about is they're not caught into this bigger issues, but what they're asking for is the simple necessities of everyday life that provides them the comforts that can get them to thinking these bigger issues that we have. When I'm asked to think of those decisions, I like to say I want to bring it back to home in a common way of our people's understanding that they have needs, and we're not addressing those needs. Not to take away from your question, but because the question is a very legitimate question. But where I'm at and where I'm standing, And just coming in, those are the bigger politics that I have to attack. And I will attack them at the time when I see fit based on more information. And I appreciate the chance that I'm being given. I may not have all the answers, but I am a person that understands that more than answers, it's solutions. And solutions involves us coming together and working together, both sides up there at the state level. And that's one of the things I'd like to hopefully do, and see where these things can go and build a better way for our state and our sustainability of our families, our people that make up our great state.
Okay, we'll move to education now, and I'll remind our audience that our questions were submitted by the public, and if you'd like to submit questions for our election forums, you can email us. The address is feedback@nmsu.edu. That's feedback@nmsu.edu. And we move to education. This question, do you support universal preschool education? If so, how would you bring it about?
I support it 100%, and I think given with NMSU's ability and access to all of our school systems, that's a real starting point. I'm an educator myself. I work with colleagues, and I can tell you sincerely, as the public has been speaking up loudly, and we're not hearing it, and that is the classroom doesn't have its resources anymore. The classroom is suffering from teachers not being able to focus on the kids because of so much standardized testing. I think that's an issue that we have to get back to investing in our best resource, and that's our children.
And where should the money come from to pay for the universal preschool education?
It has to be coming through the state. I mean, we are negating our kids' well-being. We're 49th out of 50 in the United States right now. That's not acceptable. When you ask me, where's it got to come from? It's got to come from somewhere. We've got to look at other resources, but we've got to look at it in the way of our children first. This idea, one of the ways I say right now, is stop so much standardized testing, and then we're doing it and contracting it with people from out of state and giving our profits to companies out of state. And they're the ones coming in and putting these mandates that have no understanding of what the operation is, or what I call the infrastructure of the school system. I think it's best to be left in the educators, the teachers. They're the ones that have the remedies. They have the solutions. We've not been asked that.
Okay, we move to an environmental question, also an economic one in New Mexico. How would you allocate increasingly scarce water resources?
How would I allocate? We're seeing that down here tremendously, you know, and I think that's one of the things we have to look at with the university's help of finding renewable energies and process. I've seen methods of being done abroad in other countries with great success. So I think it just comes back for us having to say, we're not above having to go to these same means of simple technology that helps us restore water back in it. We have a very highly sensitive water table, I think, and it's never been more prevalent than the last 3 years that we've had very little water down our Rio Grande, which is, it's of great viability. It's a sustainability that we've had for years. And now it becomes a question. It becomes an issue. Again, taxpayers aren't paying for us to be making politics out of a basic simplicity and necessity of everyday life, water. It just means we've got to find more resourceful, recyclable, whatever means we need to save and conserve our waters, particularly in the South.
Okay, our next question, I think you'll like this one because you've talked about it a number of times. Should the state promote renewable energy? If so, how?
Ooh, I tell you what, that's a big part of my plan for the state, you know, and I think it's something that we have to all look into very hard, because on one end, renewable energy is great, but it may diminish one other end of an industry that we're so dependent on. So I think renewable energy is a must. Again, universities we have great in the state need to be working, researching it, and I think on the other end, we need to make sure that we are able to find compatible industries that will welcome and we can invite to make a better industry. I use an example, solar panels. I talk about how much sun we have. I mean, that's something that's a basic, essential thing that can be built from ground all the way to the end of selling. We have 2 great corridors of freeways that are readily accessible. I think those are things that we need to consider ourselves and market ourselves, because we're never endless of sun. I mean, doesn't that make sense?
The solar tax credit for residential, as you know, I'm sure, expiring in 2016. If you were elected to the legislature, would you want to see that be brought back?
I think so, yes. I'd like to see that being a reconsideration, something to explore.
Okay. How would you improve access to health care, especially mental health care in the state?
I think that's an issue that's gone by the wayside, just by the fact of the results that we've had even in our own state. And I'm saying it that mental health care is an issue that's not something that we have to look down on, but we need to address. We need to open ourselves to the remedies that can fit all people, particularly our veterans. Let's cut the chase and say it for what it is. It's something that we've dropped the ball on. So I would highly support and recommend much more statutes to help mental health. Having even experienced some of it in my own family, it's a sickness that is nobody's wish, but it is our responsibility, as I think as a state or as me, a House representative, to be working for our people, be that post-veterans, be that anybody that has a family that has a need for mental health.
Another health question for you. What are your expectations for Medicaid funding in New Mexico?
You know, my support for Medicaid funding has to continue. If we're not understanding of the extreme poverty or the extreme low income that we have in our state, particularly in the South, we can't abandon people. I think that's the point of a government that has to make a turn. And I want to be a representation to our people and our constituents that we're not going to take our people and leave them to the side and say that their health is not an issue to us. I think the fact that Obamacare came in, it uplifted a lot. Yeah, it changed the industry tremendously, but let's be honest, it was needing a revamp, and it needed to be in the way of the people. And even still, we don't see those phenomenal high prices being put on prescriptions just to make up markups. I mean, this is people that are basically monopolizing the industry. And what benefit? Only for people of our great country, our great nation, to go without health, without being able to have a doctor when they need? I mean, I've seen it in other countries where they have it the same way. They may be poverty, they might have a low per capita than us in our state, in our state or in our nation, but they still have health care. And by golly, we need to keep that going. So okay. I support it.
Next question, are you in favor of a professional legislature with legislators being paid a salary? Yes or no, and why?
You know, I tell you, no. I do not want to see legislators getting paid to the point where I think that's what's created a big deal of blocking of one and the other. Somewhere I think money got in the way. And I think in the end of the day, this is a venue of me making a venture of trying to say I want to make a difference, not sit there and worry about what money's lined my pocket. In the end, I have to live with the people that I'm representing and want to hold my head up proud and say that I've done nothing of the sort as much as I've worked for them.
Well, what do you say to critics who say by having a volunteer legislature, it really limits the diversity of the group of folks, because not everyone can, go up to Santa Fe for 1 month or 2 months at a time if they have a full-time job?
And what do I say? I say, like all things in our great nation, we have to accommodate these people. These are serving, they're doing a civic responsibility. Yeah, I think they deserve some pay, something that takes care of the time that they were, up in session. And that's what the compensation seems to work at right now. And I think it's fair. I don't think it's something that's spectacular. I don't think it's something that leads me or other politicians to say it's about the money. At the end of the day, I think our politicians get together and make meeting of minds based on their constituents' input. That's my premise. Do we think that? After walking my district and talking to the people, that faith isn't there. That's the faith that I want to help try to reestablish, and why I want to establish it is simple. I'm common. I'm not a politician yet. I'm still quite a lot to learn at the best.
Where do you stand on gas and oil exploration in our state?
I think it's still a viable resource. I just don't want to see us being so dependent. I think we've seen what's happened here in the months. $620 million deficit. We put all our eggs in one basket, all right, and we're feeling it. And that's what's got to change. We got to diversify with better economy issues that can sustain us. And if one goes down a little bit, that's okay. We should still have something that's holding us up. This was clearly the way our direction from the top has been, one thing at a time, and all in, and leaving people to the waste on the side to suffer the most.
Okay. Earlier in a question about universal pre-K, you mentioned that you think that we should pay more attention to our educators. That's one of the things that you said about education. You believe that that's important to pay attention to the folks who are actually there in the classroom. This question is very broad, I realize, but again, these were submitted by the public. How would you improve our secondary school system?
First, by giving back the classroom to the teachers. Secondary education used to be one of the most funnest times of our life, most lasting impressions, most pivotal turns that all of us found ways, but it wasn't because of the teacher being to a state-driven test, to a federal-driven test. It was by the fact that the teacher stepped out of the box, came to you with real-life situations, and made it more attachable, more connectable. We don't have that now in secondary education. We are subsidizing secondary education by tutorials trying to teach what we used to call common sense, the basic process of elimination, probability, things that you can't discuss just by text. You have to discuss it in ways that relate to everyday life. And I think that's the part that when I say that the kids aren't the problem, they're our best resource. Early education, by more libraries or more e-book systems and set up in more towns is more a necessity than ever. That's how you support it at the early years. In the middle years, it's a continuation by project involvement, community involvement. By high school, by that time, they should be doing a lot more things that are made to move them in a direction of diversifying in a field that's going to lend themselves a better income, a better opportunity.
Okay. I have a question now about something that's been proposed in the state legislature a number of times. There's been a heavy push for this by business groups and by some Republicans. Do you support so-called right-to-work laws? Yes or no, and why?
I support the right-to-work laws. I mean, there's a need to have more people working. And I want to see people get that ability or chance to work through more apprenticeships, job training, on-site trainings. Right now, everything's about a profit, and we need to realize and be resourceful in this process, that we can help our young people by getting them into more earlier apprenticeships. I hear the term used, we can teach them in high school, a trade, but I still want to say, this reinventing of ourselves as a nation that we have, we need to reinvent the thinking of what we can do better and way of helping ourselves and the kids.
What would you say to critics who argue that these laws are unfair to unions, because they would allow folks to benefit from collective bargaining conducted by a union without having those folks who are benefiting from the collective bargaining pay in to union dues?
I support the union 100%, and I'll tell you that having experienced what is occurring in the work environment or the culture of education, it's more than ever a necessity of a union to be involved. I think that's the match where we're getting split off in education or district or state is doing one thing and the educators are feeling it in a rift. And when I say a rift, we're losing teachers. We're losing them at the top. That was what took care of the ones that came in at the bottom. They needed that. They didn't have that. Without that, it didn't work. And now the top is saying, I'm tired of this. I'm going to give it up. It's not the kids. It's the education system. So the system's got to be fixed. So if I've answered it incorrectly, I apologize. My point is still the same. It's just cutting the rhetoric and some of the bureaucratic tape out and get back to the classroom, investing in our kids, investing in our teachers, and investing in our schools.
Okay. Would you be in favor of public financing for all state elections? Yes or no, and why?
Would I be in support? Yeah. I mean, it's an issue that we're all working together right now, and everybody's campaign, whether it be mine or other area districts, the faith of voting is so, how should I say it, so disturbed that I'm wanting to just try to make a difference and put faith back into voting. We need our voters to be out here voting. So we need to all hold that responsibility that we have to be an educator to our people about the importance of voting. And not a dictator, not a person trying to take and violate other people's rights. We're just talking about working together and building a stronger community, whatever campaign we are, from whatever side.
Democrat Willie Madrid. Willie, thank you so much for being with us on Newsmakers.
Thank you, Fred, for having me. It was a real pleasure.
Great to have you here. A program note before we go, Republican Ricky Little was invited to join us, and we hope to have him on a future program. That's our time for now. Join us this week on KRWG Radio. Every weekday, it's Morning Edition from 5 to 9, Fresh Air at 11, followed by Here and Now, noon to 2, and All Things Considered, 4 to 7. KRWG News is always online at krwg.org, and we'd love to hear from you. Email us with your story ideas and video submissions. The address is feedback@nmsu.edu. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.